Every nation on Earth is drowning in debt. The United States owes $38 trillion. Japan owes $9 trillion. Together, the world owes more than $315 trillion, 3 times the size of the global economy. But here's the terrifying question: if everyone owes money, who is owed? The answer isn't what you think. Follow the chain of creditors and you'll see the truth. The world doesn't owe money to anyone else. It owes money to itself. And that wasn't an accident. It was designed by 4 men across 3 centuries, a system where debt is never repaid, where governments borrow forever, and interest flows endlessly upward. This isn't a conspiracy, it's documented history. Once you see how they built it, you'll understand that $38 trillion isn't a problem to solve. It's the system working exactly as designed. Before 1694, kings borrowed money the old way, from merchants and nobles, promising to pay them back with interest. If they couldn't pay, they defaulted. Simple, risky, temporary. Then came William Paterson, a failed Scottish merchant with one idea that would change civilization forever. England was broke, at war with France, desperate for money. Paterson offered the king a new deal. He and his partners would lend the crown £1.2 million. But it would never be repaid. Instead, the government would pay interest forever. 8% every year. In return, Paterson would create a new institution to manage it, the Bank of England. For the first time in history, national debt became permanent, not a problem to solve, but a feature of the system. The merchant's gold became paper, that paper became money, and the government's promise to pay became the foundation of modern finance. The trap was set. And every empire since has walked straight into it. By the early 1800s, Europe was addicted to debt. Kings borrowed for wars, ministers for power, nations for survival. But each loan was local, messy, slow, uncertain. Then came Nathan Rothschild, the man who industrialized sovereign debt. From London, he built a network of banks across Europe: Paris, Vienna, Frankfurt, Naples, connected by the fastest couriers on Earth. When governments needed money, Rothschild didn't just lend it. He turned their promises into bonds, paper that could be bought and sold like gold. War debt became a business, and for the first time, power was measured not in armies or land, but in interest rates. During the Napoleonic Wars, Rothschild used his network to move millions and information faster than anyone else. When he learned of Napoleon's defeat before London did, he used the news to control the bond market, selling first to create panic, then buying everything back at the bottom. By the time the truth arrived, he was the richest man in Europe, and governments could never default again. Because if one did, the whole network would collapse. Rothschild didn't just fund nations, he made sure they could never escape him. By 1900, America had become an economic giant. But its financial system was fragile. Banks failed, panic spread, and every crash threatened the nation. Then came J.P. Morgan, the most powerful banker on Earth. In 1907, when markets collapsed, he locked Wall Street's leaders in his library and forced them to save the system with their own money. It worked, and for a moment, one man became America's central bank. But Morgan was aging. He needed a structure that could control money forever. So in 1910, he and a handful of senators and bankers met in secret on Jekyll Island, Georgia. Behind closed doors, they designed a machine so clever it would look public, yet belong to them, the Federal Reserve System. They called it a reserve, not a bank. They split it into 12 branches to hide its center, and gave the New York Fed, Morgan's bank, the power to create money from nothing. When the law passed in 1913, the United States no longer borrowed from banks. It borrowed from its own central bank, which the banks themselves owned. Debt was no longer limited by gold or cash. It was infinite, and the interest eternal. By the 1970s, Every major nation was trapped in the same system of permanent debt. But developing countries were different. They borrowed to build roads, power plants, and dreams they could never afford. Then came Paul Volcker, chairman of the Federal Reserve. In 1979, he faced a crisis. Inflation over 10%, the dollar collapsing, foreign governments losing faith. His solution was simple and brutal. He raised interest rates to 20%, the highest in US history. It crushed inflation and crushed the world with it. Countries like Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina suddenly owed more in interest than they earned in exports. Default was inevitable until the IMF stepped in. But the IMF didn't forgive the debt. It repackaged it. It lent more money to keep the interest flowing in exchange for control. Cut your spending, sell your state assets, open your markets, surrender your sovereignty. The system was now global. No nation could default without threatening them all. The debt trap was complete, inescapable, eternal, profitable.